Well, we're going to see a lot of guys in this next 90 minutes, kind of like the early Howard Griffith. Guys trying to make a name for themselves, show up on that depth chart. Maybe for the first time, you'll probably hear some names you haven't heard before, no matter how closely you follow Big Ten football. And that is what spring practice is all about, getting a sense of what's to come here. Let's start with Penn State, the team that represented the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl last year. We all know they lose a ton of firepower, particularly at that wide receiver spot. And Darryl Clark wanted to see some of the new guys. This is not one of the new guys. This is a guy we're familiar with, Evan Royster, picking up 11 yards. A few plays later, though, one of the names you might hear quite a bit in the fall, Derek Moy. They're high on this guy. 28-yard gain after Clark finds him on the sidelines. Clark 10 of 13, 123 yards. Same drive, it is Joe Suey, Matt Suey's kid.
Fullback. I love watching his father when he was with the Bears. I love the fullback position.
The fullback thing for Howard. That theme rears its ugly head very early. Off the play action, it's Clark to Graham Zug for 24 yards, name we heard a little bit of last year, one of 4 catches for him. And the true freshman, Kevin Newsom, they hope this guy can step right in. Played for both teams, finds Brett Brackett there, 14-yard touchdown, and for what it's worth, it's a 7-7 game. Still in the second, Matthew McGlone to Zug for the touchdown. They missed the extra point. 13-7. Again, we're getting bogged down somewhat in the minutia. Shane McGregor in there at quarterback as well. And the Whites. The White wins.
All right.
21-16. Now let's focus in on the storylines now for the Nittany Lions coming out of the spring. The most obvious losses coming at wide receiver and on the offensive line. Though he did not participate in contact drills this spring, they do expect to have Sean Lee back in time for the fall. Remember, the All-Big Ten pick from a couple years ago missed all of last season with a knee injury sustained in spring ball. And then you see the note at the bottom there, Coach, regarding Joe Paterno, and that really a good jumping off point. I mean, last year at this time, we were talking about Joe Paterno coaching without a contract as of the end of the season, and there was some question as to what would happen. We kind of felt like this Penn State program was in limbo. All Paterno does is goes out, has his team get it to the Rose Bowl. Paterno gets the new contract. What do you make of this deal? I mean, we're talking about a guy now who's 82 years old. What does this contract actually mean?
Well, I think it means a lot. I think it means that if Joe wants to, he can coach the next 3 years. There's been so much discussion about Joe's retirement as he approached his retirement age the last 10 or 15 years. But at times,
his retirement age.
But at times, the university really has never come out and said what they thought. But most recently, they've come out and said, regardless of Joe being 82 and being here for 43 years, if he wants to continue to coach here, he can do it for at least the next 3 years. I think this was a great move by the university because there's been too many cases where a great coach like Joe Paterno spends a long time at one place, Howard, and it doesn't always end with a lot of grace and a lot of class. I think the university is trying to make sure that happens, and I think this is part of that move.
I'd use an interesting word, stability. And you talk about how long he's been there. Obviously, it's been there, but I think the uncertainty of the last couple of years, not just with the head coaching position, but also you now have stability with recruiting. You now have stability with your assistant coaches that are there. And I think that's all going to be important to the mindset of a team that's trying to go back and win another Big Ten title.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because you did. I mean, despite all the continuity, you did have some instability, and you, at this point, don't have it anymore as Paterno looks to enter his 44th season as a head coach. 383 career wins. That is one ahead of Bobby Bowden heading into this season. And for all the certainty now at the head coaching spot, you know, last year we were talking about uncertainty, not just at that coaching position, Howard, but also at the quarterback position. That's not an issue anymore either. Darryl Clark has firmly established himself. Remember, this time last year, it was Pat Devlin, it was Darryl Clark, back and forth. Devlin has since transferred. It's Clark's team. What do you expect to see out of him?
Well, I think he'll have another set of challenges this year. Now he's become the starter. He's going to be expected to do more things. When you talk about losing the 3 wide receivers, this is very important. Some offensive linemen in that mix as well. Now I think Clark has to guard against trying to do too much as far as the passing game is concerned. Now he doesn't have that continuity that he had last year year that he developed with those wide receivers. So it's going to be important for the wide receivers and the quarterbacks to spend a little extra time before and after practice to make sure that they're on the same page. But Clark cannot force things. He did a great job of really managing and controlling the game last year. He has to continue to do that and not allow the outside pressure of trying to do too much influence him.
The roles have reversed. I mean, now Darrell is the veteran. The 3 wide receivers are gone, and now there's a young group of wide receivers. But watching them at spring practice, there is not a lack of talent at wide receiver. They're just young and inexperienced. And if Penn State's going to compete for the conference championship, which I think they will, they have to be good at wide receiver. Not great. Here's what the receivers did last Saturday in the spring game. It's hard to know how this is going to turn out, but it's going to turn out so they're good enough at wide receiver. They may not be dominant like they were the last couple of years with Norwood, Butler, and Williams, but they'll certainly be good enough. On the other side of the ball, it's interesting. A year ago, when Sean Lee hurt his knee in a non-contact practice, it really put a cloud over this spring practice, especially for the defense. And yet, Sean Lee was on track to be better than Dan Connor, to be better than Paul Podlesny, and then he was injured. He's come back this spring. He has not been part of contact work, and it'll be interesting if he catches up to that same pace he was on. My sense of it is that he will.
And you get the sense, too, they're going to need him to be good because there are some pretty significant losses on this team on defense. Gaines and Maben obviously up front. Lydell, Sargent, Scarrato, part of that secondary that was really decimated. So if Sean Lee can come back and be close to the player that he was 2 years ago, Penn State's going to feel really good about that. They got to feel really good about the schedule when you look at it, Coach. It's pretty favorable. I mean, the non-conference slate, it's been pretty well publicized and pretty openly discussed. Obviously, is not as competitive as some people might like it to be, and we understand a lot of that due to trying to generate some revenue with home games. But even the conference slate, it seems kind of works in their favor.
Yeah, it's hard to compare non-conference schedules for all the reasons that you mentioned, but if you look at just their conference schedule, and let's assume that Penn State is one of the contenders for the conference championship, and let's assume that Ohio State might be another one, and Iowa might be the third one. Let's lump those 3 in together. Howard, as the contenders for the championship, Penn State has the luxury or the luck, whatever you want to call it, of playing both Iowa and Ohio State at home.
Well, you know, we talked a couple of years ago really about Ohio State and how their schedule lined up for them to allow their quarterback to really develop, that being Beckman at the time. This is going to be the same type of model. You get an opportunity to really get your players playing well, and I think that's going to be important for them. Things will lay out great for this team.
No Purdue, no Wisconsin on that conference schedule for what it's worth. Obviously, the Boilermakers not expected to be a top-tier contender this year, although they could surprise some people. Wisconsin, though, one of those teams you'd figure would be in the mix. So that a bit of a break for the Nittany Lions, although they've manhandled Wisconsin the last couple of years. So that's a matchup that has worked favorably for them.